So we ended last week in some confusion about our contemporary practice of korech, of making the matzah sandwich, the matzah mara sandwich, and why we're doing it, and according to whom we're doing it. And before I reiterate the confusion, I want to give you even a little bit more data to think about, and if time allows, we'll come back to it. But we have to forge ahead to start the class. Take a look at paragraph 7. I'm not sure if we started paragraph 7 last week or not, but whether we did or not, it's worthy of repetition. Tzarech Iyun. And we need to investigate. For those of you who are watching on TorahAnytime.com, this is the Minchas Yerushalayim print of the Minchas Chinuch. I have my own numbering system, but this is on Daf Mem, on page Mem, and it's the Dibra Maschel, it's the paragraph that begins with the words Tzarech Iyun. For us, it's paragraph 7. Tzarech Iyun, Im Ochel Kazayis Pesach, in temple times, right, when there still was the Passover offering, the carbon Pesach. Let's say you ate a kazayas, an olive's worth of the Pesach. Let's say you ate at the very same time less than a kazayas of matzah and maror. Okay, so before we read any more, does anybody remember from last week what his discussion was about eating less than an olive's worth? You remember what he was wondering about, what issue he was handling? Yeah.
It was still considered a mitzvah.
Okay, is there any point to doing it? Right? We know that a mitzvah has certain specs, right? It's not considered like you fulfilled the mitzvah of eating matzah or Pesach or maror unless you consumed a certain volume within a certain amount of time, right? So the question was, let's say you've got less than that volume. Is there any point in eating less? Okay, and what was his corollary, Ayleb? You remember? He tried to draw a precedent from another halacha. You remember what he tried to compare it to? Okay, what's the opposite of a mitzvah? Okay. Another word for really an avera is a transgression of a mitzvah, but of a negative mitzvah. There are positive mitzvahs, and there are negative mitzvahs. There are foods we are commanded to eat, and there are foods we are commanded not to eat. Matzah, maror, Pesach, on the night of Passover, the night of Seder, is a mitzvah to eat, right? Karbanos, when there was a Beis HaMikdash, there was a mitzvah to eat of the flesh of those karbanos that were edible, that you were allowed to eat. But there's also mitzvahs not to eat. Don't eat swine flesh. Don't eat an animal that died of its own accord. Don't eat shellfish. Don't eat meat and milk combinations. Okay, so eating is eating, and a mitzvah is a mitzvah. There are mitzvahs that are positive mitzvahs, and then there are isurim. There are prohibitions created by mitzvahs. Okay? What does the phrase, anyone remember the phrase? Chatzi shir osur min haTorah? Anyone remember that phrase?
No.
Okay. Ayolai chatzi shir osur min haTorah? Remind us what it means.
You don't have to bring a carbon if you eat less than a kazayas of forbidden food. However, the Torah still doesn't permit you to eat it. Nonetheless.
Right. Okay. So, it's not just a question of a carbon. In the case of those things you would have to bring a carbon for, it's also for corporal punishment. For makas, right? The Bezdin, the courts are not going to punish you if you ate less than the you want to give the handout to Leslie? If you ate less than the requisite shir. But it's still awesome in Torah. It's still on a Torah level, not on a rabbinic level. On a Torah level, it's still forbidden. So, the Minchas Chinuch that we learned last week tried to draw a parallel between the two, and he said, the same way Bezdin can't punish unless you eat the speck, unless you eat the minimum amount an olive's worth. But it's still forbidden to eat less than an olive's worth. Similarly, some Rishonim learn that even though you don't get the full reward, the full benefit, however you want to understand, I mean, Bezdin Shalmata, the earthly courts, don't reward us for doing mitzvahs. Right? It's between us and God, ultimately, right? But it's a mitzvah, the mitzvah is its own reward. You don't really fulfill the mitzvah unless you eat a kazayas. But the same way you transgress the negative mitzvah when you eat less than a zayas, maybe you were accomplishing something incrementally, right, when you eat part of a mitzvah. And you talk about sirif, you talk about the ability to eat another zayas later, half a zayas later, and so on. Okay. So now, here's the question. Okay? You eat a kazayas of Pesach, right? And let's say along with the Pesach. We were discussing before sandwiches. Yeah, what did Hillel HaZaken do when the Beis HaMikdash was around? Hayalakeach, Pesach, or Matzah, Marav, Karcham biyachad. Right? He would wind Pesach, Matzah, and Marav together, right? And he would eat as a gyro, as a lafa, whatever you want to call it, a combination. Okay, we had a whole lot of fun last week. Decided what got wrapped around what. Okay, if the matzah was getting wrapped around the other two, if the leaf of maror was getting wrapped, if a slab of meat was getting wrapped, I don't know, but whatever. Korech means to bind, to wind, to wrap something. The point is he ate them all simultaneously. That's the point. Okay, so let's say it's temple times, and you want to do according to Hillel Shita. And if you recall the passage of Gemara, if time allows, we're going to review it tonight anyway. But the passage of the Gemara in Masechet Pesachim, Tav Kuf Tesvav, said that even the opponents of Hillel only hold that the sandwich, the gyro, isn't a must. It isn't an absolute. But if you want to eat them together, you could, right? So the best way to fulfill these three mitzvahs of the night of Passover, the three eating mitzvahs, is to do them all in one fell swoop. Eat your kazayas of matzah, maror, and Pesach together. That way, we call it, what from people today call frumme, I should say, called being yoytzel l'chol hadayis. I'm fulfilling the mitzvah according to Hillel, and I'm even fulfilling the mitzvah according to the opponents of Hillel. They have no opposition to eating them together. They say if you want, you can eat them separately. But they have no opposition to eating them together.
You said last class that the matzah was part of, that they offset, one is a mitzvah and the other part are, I'm not exactly word for word what you were saying the last class.
No, you're saying very good. Offset is the only imprecise word. Negate, the mavatal.
Negate.
Right.
Negate.
They nullify.
Okay. Right.
Good, very on the ball. Okay. So that's the segue into number 7. Let's start reading again. Sarchin. Imochel kazayas Pesach v'ochel b'basachas pachas mikazayas matzamar. What would happen if in temple times a guy would eat an olive's worth of meat at a Korban Pesach, but only half an olive size of matzah and or maror? What's the question? Lashit o shavei silelos alef. What I brought before in the first os. Okay, in his numbering system is aleph. In my numbering system, it was paragraph number 5, which we did last week. The gam b'pachas mikashir mitzvah min atayr ike k'may b'yisurin, that even when you have less than the absolute requisite amount, there is still some kind of a Torah level mitzvah, just as we find by negative commandments, what we call prohibitions, right? You get corporal punishment if you eat a kazayas of pork. But that doesn't mean that you're allowed to eat 3/4, a half, a quarter of a kazayas of pork. Can't eat it. It's also min atayr. The minutest amount of pork, it's forbidden to eat on a Torah level. So similarly, if I've only got a quarter of a zayis of matzah, go ahead and eat it. It's not the full mitzvah, but it's some kind of a mitzvah. Something's going on. Right? After, it could be that you still fulfill the mitzvah of eating the Pesach completely. The pachas mikashir nami mitzvah. Ve'enim avatelos haPesach. Less than a shear, according to those opinions, is also a mitzvah, and therefore would not nullify the Korban Pesach. The mitzvahs enim avatel zu, because mitzvahs are not mavatel one another. Parenthetically, if you recall, because you remembered, I'm not sure everyone else here remembers because it's a little bit arcane, but just to refresh your memory, Hillel himself said, and this was the paradox, we couldn't understand our contemporary practice. We read in the Haggadah that we're doing our sandwiches, Zeichel HaMikdash Hillel, to remember the temple times according to Hillel. And Hillel himself says in the Gemara that Bisman Hazeh, now after the destruction of the temple, right, he was a figure who straddled both eras. He was alive when the temple was up, he was alive when the temple was down. And he said, nowadays that we have no temple, right, don't eat them together. Because maror in this era is only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, right, which means on a Torah level, another way of saying a mitzvah d'Rabbanan is to say, a mitzvah of rabbinic origin, is to say that on a Torah level it's no mitzvah at all. Yeah, you could just as easily be eating carrots or a sweet vegetable as a bitter herb on a Torah level, right? So the same way you shouldn't eat a carrot together with your Korban Pesach, because then we would say that there's a problem of bittul, right? If you got more carrot in your mouth than you do Korban Pesach in your mouth, so there's something we call bittul baroiv, nullification in a mere majority. Yeah, just having a majority of another food nullifies the minority food, right? So you can have the same problem with maror, which that was the head scratcher. That's we said stay tuned for next week. Although I'm not 100% sure we're going to resolve this with a little time that we have left. But that was the big question. We couldn't understand Pashup Pshat in the Gemara if that's what Hillel said. So what are we doing in our Haggadahs and our Starim to do the opposite of what Hillel said and saying it's a memory of what he did in temple times? He himself makes clear the distinction between temple times when maror was a mitzvah d'oraisa and post-temple times when maror is not a mitzvah d'oraisa. Question?
Well, I was going to say, you have the two pieces of matzah. Does the two pieces of matzah offset the small little maror that you put on?
It's complicated. It's complicated. Let's learn a little bit more, and then I'll be able to provide a more intelligent answer.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Oh, Dilma, okay, we're up to, in this paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the top of the paragraph. The last word on the line. Oh, Dilma, perhaps, the mikol makom klisha ha-mitzvah umevatelas l'mitzvah d'oraisa k'ma mitzvah d'rabanan nachshav rishus l'gabe d'oraisa. In other words, yeah, if in temple times I have half a zayas of maror, or 3/4 of a zayas of maror, okay, is that more or less of a mitzvah than in post-temple times having a full zayas of maror? In post-temple times we say matzah is still a mitzvah d'oraisa, maror is only a mitzvah d'rabbanan. Right? Be'er of Teichel matzahs, remember, Leslie, is a separate pasuk that disconnects the eating of matzah from the Korban Pesach. We learned last week the Rambam holds that if you only have Pesach, you should still eat the Korban Pesach, even according to Hill. It's not totally in the other two mitzvahs. It doesn't depend for its fulfillment on the other two mitzvahs. But maror, the only place the Torah says about maror is al matzahs umrarim yachluha. Yachluha or yachluhu? Yachluhu. You should eat it, meaning the Korban Pesach, with matzahs umrarim. Right? So maror is only said as an adjunct to the Korban Pesach. If it's impossible to fulfill the Korban Pesach, so maror is at best a mitzvah d'rabbanan. The mitzvah of the Torah was to eat it as a garnish or together with whatever. V'haistis, the Korban Pesach. Okay, so here's the chakira. Think about this for a moment. Again, which is the greater of the two mitzvahs? Eating 3/4 of a zayas of maror during the temple times, or eating a full zayas of maror nowadays?
Interesting. And maybe it would have to do it based on who shita it is. If part
Mekal Shitase, yeah.
Pachas Mikashir is Name Ika Mitzvah.
Right.
Then you'd say then in temple times, because then it's Deraisa. When it was Deraisa, then it's more important. Then afterwards having a full Shir when it's a Derabanan.
Good. But if you hold, like the Shitas, that there's no Inyan whatsoever,
then
to eat a Pachas Mikashir of maror, then obviously it's worse than a Mitzvah Derabanan B'zman. It's less. Worse, not the word. It's less meaningful.
Batelis issue.
Right. Okay. So, but what he's declaring is, that even according to the Shitas, that hold that there's a mitzvah to eat 3/4 or 1/4 of a zayas or 1/8 of a zayas, right? But it's still not the full mitzvah, correct? Just as in Isurim, I don't get the threshold of getting malchus or b'shaygig having to bring a carbon for machalos asuros, for forbidden foods, unless I reach the sheer threshold, correct? So yes, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, also minatayra, mitzvah minatayra. But it's not the same Isser, and it's not the same mitzvah.
No.
So that's what he's declaring.
But the Korban Pesach was a deraisa, and during temple times, that was important. That was the ikra.
So the hypothetical that he's coming up with, precisely, he's asking if I have a full zayas of the Korban Pesach in temple times, right? And I only have less than the zayas of matzah and maror. Do we say that there's a problem of bittul or not? Mitzvah and mevatel. If they're on equal footing, then we say there's a klal that mitzvah and mevatel zuasu. Even if one is a majority, one's a minority, one can't nullify the other. That's whatever. That's the propensity of mitzvahs. But rishus, but non-mitzvah foods could be mevatel mitzvah foods, which is why Hillel said nowadays don't eat your matzah and your maror together. Matzah is still a daraisa, maror is only the rabbanan. Which is said in other words, that means maror is a rishus. Vis-a-vis the daraisa level, maror is like carrots. Maror is like sweet peppers. Right? Okay. So he wants to know, what about in the Beis HaMikdash times when Mar was also daraisa? If I only got less than a shear of Mar, do I say, well, it's still a mitzvah? Chatzi shear also minatayra in machal asuras, chatzi shear mitzvah minatayra in positive mitzvahs, right? So it still has that quality of animavat l'zu, or do we say no? The less than a shear is still, it's minatayra, but it's still not on the level of the shear. Same way the Rabbanan is not on the level of the shear, a pachas mikashir is not on the level of the shear. Let's read it in his words inside. I see a very quizzical look on some of your faces. Let's read it in his words again. Okay?
I understand the question.
Oh, Dilmar, perhaps, the Mikol Makam Klisha mitzvah, it's still a weak mitzvah. It's not the shear. So yes, it's a mitzvah minatayra. It's hard to quantify it. Yes, it's the raisa, but it's not the full mitzvah. So it's weaker. In Isurim, it's very easy. You have your indicator, you have your litmus test. Less than a shear, there will be no consequence in the real world. Shear, there will be a consequence. If it was done with premeditation, you'll get malchus. If it was done by accident, it's a large sheish b'karos, you'll have to bring a carbon. Less than a shear, you shouldn't know how to done it, but it has no consequence in bezin shalmata. In mitzvahs, not maisis, in mitzvahs asay, in positive mitzvahs, it's harder to quantify, right? But it's still obviously something less, or else we wouldn't have shiurim. Yeah, if you could eat whatever you want and fulfill the same mitzvah as the brisker guys eating the big kazaisim and putting it off into the side of their mouth and swallowing it all, b'beis habliya b'basachas, that they shouldn't have to worry about the achil's pras either. It's all b'basachas, the whole shear. You know, and that's a beautiful, considered a beautiful chumrah and hidden mitzvah and azavaita, and so on and so forth. They're not the same. They're not on par with one another. But how do I quantify it? Are they so not on par, as Hillel said, comparing a mitzvah d'Rabbanan to a mitzvah d'Oraisa, or not? That's his chakira. Let's read on. Kamay mitzvah d'Rabbanan nechshavas l'rishus l'gabe d'Oraisa. Do I say that just as a mitzvah d'Rabbanan is considered a rishus, meaning not a mitzvah at all, vis-a-vis d'Oraisa, so pachas mikashir, which yes is a mitzvah d'Oraisa, but it's a weak mitzvah, and maybe it's also considered a rishus, a non-mitzvah, vis-a-vis a full-blooded, full-bodied, if you will, mitzvah that has the shear, that has the requisite amount. However, the al-kol chatzi shear mitzvah d'oraisa l'shita zu, adif midrabanan, v'enem avat l'zuasu. Okay, so we're searching for a precedent, and I have to say, because of the Pesach rush, I was not able to research this fully. If you allow me to, I will try to look it up now, though. Okay, uviyaradei sim reish lamites shach sivkat mechaf hevi deyes this rabban cham mechatzi shir after asim and atayra linyan shvuah. I'm not sure what he means linyan shvuah. If he means linyan shvuah, the shvuah is chal, like this we say nishba v'ayim Sinai. Let me read to the end of the paragraph, and then I'll try to discuss it intelligently. Okay. In this Siman Yardei, the Shach discusses this Isser not vis-a-vis positive mitzvahs, but vis-a-vis negative mitzvahs. Okay? What's worse? Okay? And I won't go with hypotheticals. I'll give you practical examples. Okay? Basa b'chalav, meat and milk combinations, minatayra, do not include fowl. The fact that you cannot have a chicken cheeseburger is an Isser d'Rabbanan. Okay? So here's the question. What's worse? Is it worse to eat a 3/4 of a zayas of a beef burger? Of a beef cheeseburger? Or is it worse to eat a full zayas of a chicken cheeseburger? One is asam and atayra, but less than a shear. The other one is only an Isser d'Rabbanan, but is the full shear. Which of those is worse? Which is really the flip side of the chakira that we have here. Which do you think is worse?
Why should the Rabbanan be worse? Why should the Rabbanan be any less than the Dairaisa, especially with the shear, since we say usually that you can't transgress a Dairaisa prohibition, you can't transgress a Rabbanan prohibition. Well,
because the Chatzi Shir is still the stuff that the Torah itself prohibited, whereas the Torah was silent on chicken cheeseburgers. As far as the Torah is concerned, if the Rabban won't worry about Dil Masal HaChlufi, that you'd mix up fowl and beef, Yeah?
Right.
As far as Hashem, so to speak, himself is concerned, go ahead and enjoy a
But
chicken
so
cheeseburger.
what?
That's not what I prohibited.
But so what?
Right.
Once the Rabbanim prohibited it, boom, it's just as chaymer. It's just as it's just as severe.
No,
Right.
not correct. It's not just a severe. I want you to pass on the shallow for me. Let's say, again, two hypotheticals. You make the call. Rabbi, I've got this cheeseburger over here. Okay, the cheese I know is real cheese. Okay, the chicken might be real chicken or it might be mock chicken made out of soy protein. I'm allowed to eat it or not. Or, Rabbi, I got this cheeseburger here. The cheese I know is real cheese. The beef is either real beef or it's soy protein beef. I just don't know. That's a simplistic shaila. Okay, so it's not a good example because in a case like that,
You wouldn't want to do it anyway.
no, it's actually you wouldn't want to do it anyway. It's actual levrure.
Right.
It's very easy to find out if that's soy or a chemist could tell you. You could get a guy to eat it, a guy conversationally could eat it for you and say what it tastes like if it's the real thing. You could go looking for the package, it's all processed foods. I'm not talking halacha l'maisa. But let's say hypothetically we'd be in a situation where it's iyashal levrui. There's no way in the world. The technology is so advanced right now. They're doing it with cloning, they're doing it with genetic engineering, that the mock chicken is mamish the molecular twin of the real chicken. Right? Except that the mock chicken you're allowed to eat with a milk combination. So if you would go to the Rav, and the question is a chicken cheeseburger, he'll say, enjoy, b'tei avon, bon appetit.
Right.
And if it's beef, he'll say, no, you have to be machmer. It's fake d'oraisa l'chumrah. So no, a d'rabanan and a d'oraisa are not equal.
Right.
Okay. Let's just finish the end of the paragraph. Then I said, if you'll allow me, I'll look for a few minutes and see what he means l'gabi shua. Okay. So anyway, the shach over there says like this. The Isra d'Rabbanan Chomer Mechatzi Shir. A full shear of an Isra d'Rabbanan is considered more stringent, a more heinous sin than a Chatzi Shir, which is also min haTorah. It's also min d'Rabbanan. It's also min haTorah. It doesn't matter. Eating a full shear of the d'Rabbanan is something worse. Linian Shua. If I can, I'll try to figure out for you in a few minutes what it means Linian Shua. Given the Chatzi Shir, lo mefurish b'Torah. Because the Torah never explicates the forbiddenness of a Chatzi Shir. Al kain Isra d'Rabbanan du belav d'lei soser chomer. The shach svar is every d'Rabbanan is really d'Oraisa. Why do we have to listen to the d'Rabbanan? Because it says like soser and adav rashay rucha. Very good. So repeat after me. Baruch shekivanti. Okay, you had the same logic as the shach. Im kain, if so, kiv and the chazina did the d'Rabbanan avir shus l'gabi d'Oraisa. So now I'm going to make a kal v'chomer for you. If the shach says, then Isra d'Rabbanan is more serious, it's more chomer, it's more real than a Chatzi Shir of an Isra d'Oraisa, and if we see that an Isra d'Rabbanan can be mevatel a mitzvah, right? Hillel says after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, do not eat maror, which is d'Rabbanan, together with matzah, which is still d'Oraisa. The taste of the maror, the volume of the maror, will come and be mevatel and nullify the matzah d'Oraisa. We don't say ein mitzvahs mevatlas, so we say they're not on par. One's a mitzvah and one's a non-mitzvah. So kol sheken chatzi shir. So certainly my shaila, a chatzi shir, even according to those shitas that holds there's a point to eating a chatzi shir of maror, or a chatzi shir of korban pesach, or a chatzi shir of matzah the night of pesach. Yeah? But still, it's less than d'Rabbanan. It's not as serious, okay? Whether it's positive or negative. It doesn't have the oomph of a d'Rabbanan. So for the Rabbanan, a full shear of Marah Bizman Hazeh could come and be Mavatal, a shear of Matzah Bizman Hazeh, Kal V'chaymer, the Bizman HaMikdash, a Chatzi shear of Marah could be Mavatal, a full shear of Pesach. You get the Minchas Chinuch Kal V'chaymer?
No.
You don't?
Not completely.
Okay. The first thing to understand is that we're working an equation between the positive and the negative. We're saying that whatever is true for the negative commandments of the Torah, if Chatzi Shir is awesome in the Torah, then Chatzi Shir is a mitzvah in the Torah. Okay? But with the same Gedarm, on whatever level, on whatever intangible level. Now again, it's much more tangible when you're dealing with negative commandments, with Averis. Because we know when you hit the threshold, human beings kick in. Yeah? The executive arm kicks in. We're going to punish you. Mm-hmm. Yeah? In mitzvahs, we don't see the difference whether I eat 3/4 of a zayas or a zayas and a half, or 2 zaysim, or a kadeya, or the Chazon Ish shir, or a Reb Chaim Noah shir. There's nothing tangible. Tangibility aside, we're talking theoretically. We know that a shir is a certain threshold. It's the thing itself. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is a kazayas b'chtei achilus pras. Now he brought in Ice Aleph, number 5 in our numbering system, that there are Paiskim, the Rishonim who say that the same way Chatzi Shir in Lavim and negative commands is awesome in Atayra, so too Chatzi Shir in mitzvah eatings and mitzvah ingestibles is a mitzvah in Atayra. It's not the mitzvah. The same way Chatzi Shir in Yisurim is not the Aveira. But it's a mitzvah. It's how to quantify, I don't know. We know it's not the threshold, but it's something. And what that something is on a Deraisa Dika level, not on a Derabanan Dika level. It's not the Rabban came along, they said, well, we shouldn't forget these mitzvahs altogether, stay in practice, keep on doing it. No, it's part and parcel of the mitzvah of the Torah. When the Torah said, eat matzahs, eat maror, eat carbon pesach, it meant a shear. But if you don't have the shear, I still want you to eat it. I'm still commanding you to eat what is available. Okay? So number 1, we have the equation. Okay? Number 2, okay? What is more serious? What is more of a mitzvah or an avera? A full shear in a derabanan, or a half shear in a deraisa? Nafkamina for us, practical application for us I can't call it practical application because he declared the chakira in temple times, okay? And the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the practical nafkamina would be, we know that you shouldn't eat your Korban Pesach with carrots or with peppers. Okay, you eat your kazayas or Korban Pesach, your mouth is free of other things. According to Hillel, you have to have kairach, you have to have combination, you have to have the gyro of the Pesach matzah mar. That's a special rule. Ein mitzvahs mavatl zuazu. Mitzvahs don't have the capacity to nullify one another. But a carrot could nullify your mar, right? A piece of deer, kosher venison, could nullify your Korban Pesach. If it's a rishus, if it's not the mitzvah, we're not talking about Yisurim, chas v'shalom. Things that you're permitted to eat, they're just not mitzvah to eat. But if the volume of them will exceed, or the taste, whatever, we'll get into that in a minute, what kind of nullification is going on over here. Volume, taste, whatever. But there's such a problem. And that's why Hillel himself, the inventor, if you will, of the sandwich, long before the rule of sandwich, Hillel said that Bisman Hazeh, do not eat matzah and maror together. Maror is only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, which is to say, midaraisa, it's equivalent to a carrot. So you wouldn't eat your matzah with carrots. The carrots might be mavatal the matzah. Don't eat your matzah with maror. The maror could be mavatal the matzah. The maror is no mitzvah. So he declared, what about Bisman HaMikdash? A riff on Hillel's din. What about if I have my Korban Pesach? We learned before that you could be Yaitzi your Korban Pesach alone. You don't have to eat other things with it. Now I only have a chatzi zayas of matzah or a chatzi zayas of maror. Should I eat those things together or not with it? Or do I say I'm going to run into a problem of bittul? So according to those shittas and the paiskim that hold that there is no equation, there is no corollary between the positive and the negative, that chatzi shir is also not I shouldn't eat half a zayas of pork. Yes, true. But to eat a half a zayas of matzah is meaningless. So of course, avoiding a half a zayas of matzah or half a zayas of maror together with your Korban Pesach Bisman HaMikdash. It'll be mavatal. It'll nullify your Korban Pesach. You won't fulfill the mitzvah of Korban Pesach either.
Right.
But according to the shittas that it is a mitzvah, so now I have a chakira. Is it better than a d'Rabbanan? That Hillel said, avoid eating d'Rabbanans together with your d'Oraises, you might come to nullification? Or do I say, no, this is something more serious than a d'Rabbanan?
Last part I didn't get.
A chatzi shir of maror, when the Beis HaMikdash stood, a full shir of maror when the Beis HaMikdash stood, there's a mitzvah d'Oraisa of maror.
Right.
A chatzi shir of maror, we're saying is a mitzvah min atayra.
Yeah.
It's not d'Rabbanan like maror bisman hazeh. It's a mitzvah min atayra, but what kind of a mitzvah? Not the shir. Something less than the shir. Right? But is it something more than the d'Rabbanan or less than the d'Rabbanan? That was the question. That was his chakira.
Toby said it's more than a dirham.
So he's bringing a raya from the shach. That, not like that. The shach says that a full shear, I don't know what the words lagabi shvul mean yet. So give me 2 minutes, I'll try to look it up and tell you what it means. But the shach says clearly that a full shear of a Isser D'Oraisa, of a Isser D'Rabbanan, a full shear, a kazayas of a chicken cheeseburger, is a more serious avera than a half a shear, a half a zayas of a beef cheeseburger. Chatzi shear asam in atayra. It's asam in atayra, says a shach, but it's not mafurish in the Torah.
Right.
A kazayas of a D'Rabbanan is mafurish in the Torah. Okay, up until now you got it?
Yeah.
The shach story you agree with?
Yeah.
So now listen to the Minchas Kal V'chaimer. Okay? These are the two cases I'm comparing, and I'm going to make a Kal V'chaimer between them. Case number one, the one it says in the Gemara. Hillel says, B'zman hazeh, the temple is in ruins, don't eat matzah with maror. A full zayis of matzah with a full zayis of maror. Why not? It's as good as eating carrots. It's only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. It's going to be mevatel the matzah that you're eating. Don't eat your maror together with your matzah anymore. Okay?
Yeah.
Question. B'zman hamikdash. Should I eat a half a shear of matzah, of maror, with a full shear of matzah, or the way he asked, a full shear of carbon pesach? Right? So now we're saying a kal v'chaimer. Yeah? If the mitzvah d'Rabbanan, the full mitzvah d'Rabbanan of a kazayas of maror, is still considered like an achilas rishus, still considered like eating carrots, bizman hazeh, to eat it together with your matzah, and therefore Hillel says, don't do it.
Right.
So kal v'chaimer, when the Beis HaMikdash stood, to eat a half a zayas of maror together with your full zayas of carbon pesach, it'll be mevatel.
Why is that kal v'chaimer?
Because the shach says that a chatzi shear is a less serious thing. A chatzi shear of a thing d'oraisa is a less serious thing than a full shear of a thing d'Rabbanan. The thing that the shach is talking about is negative. He's talking about Isurim. But again, we're making an equation between the negative and the positive. The point is, it's more serious. Whether it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, takanas chachamim, or a gzeres chachamim, it's still the same pasuk in the Torah. Le'sasim min adavar asher yerucha yamin usmal. Kachol asher yerucha tat. There's an asay and a lois asay. A mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Right? Do as they are myra as they paskin for you, and do not deviate from what they paskin for you. Right? So Shach says it's right, because that's a pasuk in the Torah, that makes the Rabbanans have more oomph than Chatzi Shirs. Full shiurim of the Rabbanans have more oomph than Chatzi Shir. Right. So he's Machri Yishal. He's saying that according to that Shach, when the Beis HaMikdash stood, if a guy only had a Chatzi Zayas of maror, he should not eat it together with a carbon pesach. You want to eat it separately when there isn't a problem of bittul. But do not eat it together. You can certainly be Yitzhak your carbon pesach without the maror. The question is, am I allowed to eat it together with maror? Don't. You'll lose your carbon pesach too. It might be mevatel.
That's the second part of the kal v'chaimer.
That's the hayra, that's the psak that's arrived at as a result of the kal v'chaimer. Huh? There's the kal and there's the chamer. The kal is Hillel's din in the Gemara we learned last week. Bizman hazeh. Do not eat a full zayas of maror together with a full zayas of matzah. The maror will be mevatel the matzah. Why? Because lagabi the matzah, it's a rishus. It's like eating carrots or peppers together with your matzah. Right. Yeah? We're saying that a full shear, the Rabbanan, is more meaningful than a chatzi shear minatayra. So if the full shear, the Rabbanan, is still considered the varishus, so certainly a chatzi shear minatayra is still considered the varishus, even if you hold it's a mitzvah.
Full shear the rabbanim bizman hazeh is rishus. No.
Depends what you're talking about. What makes it into a D'Rabbanan is the Zman Hazeh part. The fact that the Beis HaMikdash is not standing, I mean, the Beis HaMikdash is beside the point. The fact is that there's no carbon pesach today. And maror is only supposed to be eaten as an adjunct to the carbon pesach. Right? Yeah. Whether it means in the same meal, like the Rabbanan, the Wargir on Hillel, or like Hillel, Amatzah, Marim, Yechlu, then you got to eat the Marim Mamish together with it. Right? But it's only a mitzvah on the night when you're being yaitz the mitzvah of the carbon pesach. No carbon pesach, no maror d'oraisa. Maror b'zman hazeh is midrabanan. Matzah b'zman hazeh, because there's a separate pasuk that says be'er of teichel matzahs. Matzah is still a d'oraisa. Absent the carbon pesach, it's still a d'oraisa. So the kal v'chaimer is, if Hillel said, don't eat your maror after there's no more carbon pesach, do not eat your maror together with your matzah, the maror will be mevatel the matzah, You can't say the dispensation of ein mitzvahs mevatlis or mitzvahs cannot nullify one another. It's not a mitzvah vis-a-vis the matzah. So certainly a half a zayas of maror, even when there was a carbon pesach, was also a reshus, was a non-mitzvah vis-a-vis the carbon pesach.
Why is that a chaymer? Because in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, the morer was dairaisa.
But you're not eating a full zayas of the maror. You only eat a chatzi zayas of the maror.
But who says that a chatzi
The shach.
shir b'shach?
The shach says that it's worse to eat a full shear of an issa d'Rabbanan than a chatzi shear of an issa d'Oraisa. Lagabi shua. What do you mean lagabi shua? I don't think I'm going to bother to look it up right now because that'll take us down the rest of the night. I want to spend the next 15 minutes learning a piece of Gemara in Zvachim. And maybe if we have time, we'll get to number 8 in the Minchas. Now, gentlemen, you know that I always tout, unfortunately, except with Torah anytime, I don't think we're drawing the standing room only crowds that we should for these Minchas Shiurim. And maybe we have to reconsider them in the curriculum for next term. What do you say? We continue after Pesach or not?
Yeah,
You'll bring your buddies along next time? Okay. We should get.
I think it's a diamond in the rough.
We should get a learning quorum over it. But you know that one of my big selling points about Minchas Chinuch is the concentration. You got a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of svara, a lot of using your head in an hour shear.
in a lot of
And if you
ways,
want-
a small crowd is better than a very large crowd.
Okay, but not in the way of stroking my ego. Not in that way.
You know what the Jewish version of the ego is.
Okay, gentlemen, take this Gemara in Zvachim. We're going to learn literally one halach here in the Gemara, and the Gemara itself says, I learn out 3 concepts from this one halach. 3 lines of Gemara we're going to learn. And you're going to get so much data over here. You're going to love this. But I got to give you a little Hagdama. Okay, this is Kodshim 101. Okay, there's a whole 1/6 of the Talmud, 1/6 of Shas called Seder Kodshim. Seder Kodshim deals with the Beis HaMikdash and the things done therein. More so the things done therein. There's one little Masechta called Masechta Midas, which talks about the architectural specs of the Beis HaMikdash. Almost all the other Masechtas in Seder Kodshim are about what we call bringing karbanis, doing sacrifices. Sacrifices, wine libations, meal offerings, the whole 9 yards. Okay. Learn these 3 terms before we start learning this Gemara. 3 isurim, 3 things that are kodshim specific. They're only isurim, they're only prohibitions when you're dealing with kodshim. By kodshim I mean animal sacrifices, which include bird sacrifices, meal offerings, things made out of flour, okay, and to a certain extent also incense offerings and wine libations. Some of these isurim, but for simplicity's sake, zvachim and menachos, things that are slaughtered and meal offerings. Okay, there's an issa called pigul. Pigul is what we call a machshavas chutz l'zmanei, out of time boundary. If the Kohen, when he's doing the services with your offering, in the case of an animal, when he's slaughtering it, when he's collecting the blood, when he's transporting the blood, when he's sprinkling the blood on the altar, if during any of those 4 steps he's thinking, this is a sacrifice that we're allowed to eat today and tomorrow. But you know what? I'm going to eat it next week. That's called a machshavas pigul. That was a false, an abominable thought. What's so abominable about it, we'll leave for a philosophy class. Just take it on faith. It's a machshavas pigul, and it invalidates the carbon, and it makes the flesh of the carbon forbidden even before the time of it, immediately. There's an invalid carbon, and if you eat meat from this carbon, it was slaughtered properly, the blood was sprinkled with the bride technique, the wrong thought, right? You want to know how do we know the thoughts? The Gemara in Zvachim says he speaks out the thoughts. Okay. He says, as he's sprinkling the blood, he says, we're going to eat this 3 days from now. Okay? Or if it's a tighter, 2 days from now.
You're like, get out of here,
Right.
get out of here,
Right. No, there's a proactive and verbalized thought. Okay? So now, the meat of this carbon becomes immediately forbidden to eat.
So is that what it means by pigul hu lo yerotzeh?
Yes. Yeah. Lo yerotzeh, you're not yaitz of the carbon. If it happens in any what's called the 4 avodas hamatir, in Zvachim, Shchita, Kabbalah, Hailachas, Rika, or Menachas, Kmitza, Kiddush Kaimitz, Halacha, Haktara. Any of those 4 steps, those are called Avayas HaMater. Putting on the Levina is also an Avayas HaMater for the Shiar HaMincha. Anything that's matter, the edible parts of the carbon, if while you're doing those services, you have this machshava, lo yaratza, the carbon doesn't count for you. If it was a neder rather than a nedava, it would have to be a do-over. But besides it's lo yaratza, there's an issue to eat it. Okay? Nicer, leftovers, is you have the right thoughts. You wouldn't think anything, you have private thoughts. You don't have to have any thoughts. The only thought is, okay, I'm applying the blood in the right place. I'm putting the kaimitz, I'm putting the fistful of flour on the mizbeach the way I'm supposed to. Right? But then the time limit passes. It is 3 days later and you still have leftovers of the carbon. That's called nicer. That's also a kachim specific prohibition. Right? In chulin meat, the non-consecrated meat, you want to salt it, you want to keep it for a year, you want to make beef jerky out of it, be my guest. You know? As long as you retard spoilage, I mean, if it becomes unhealthy to you, it's going to make you sick. It might be the Yisra who shmat moed l'nafshesech. Right? But there's no such thing as, oh, it's leftovers, it's too old. Yeah, it becomes forbidden. No such thing. Yeah? And tamei is pshat is if the meat of the flesh of the carbon becomes tamei. Okay, there were kedoshim, there were prushim, in ancient Israel, who were said to eat chulin al taras hakaidish. They had a chumrah. They would only eat their regular food with the same level of tahara, of purity, like kachim. But kachim become puzzle and become forbidden to eat. You touch a dead rat, even a little bit. It's not a question of hygiene. You can cut off the piece to touch the rat. It doesn't matter. The whole side of beef can become ritually impure by contact with a rat or other means of becoming tamei. If the meat of the carbon becomes ritually impure, you're not allowed to eat it. Now listen to this. See the 2 dots? The 2 diamonds that look like smack in the middle of the page? Okay? For those who don't see the 2 dots, I'll count off okay, we're talking at the center of the page, not the Rashi with the blocks with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Third word on the line. Amar Reish Lakish said the following. Hapigol v'anoisav tamei. Shebaul on zebazeh. If a guy took a shtick pigul, a shtick noiser, and a shtick tamei, okay, all flesh from karbanis, or not necessarily flesh, maybe it's flour or matzah from menachas, okay, because all 3 of these isurim could happen by menachas too, right? And he mixed them all together. Sound reminiscent of something?
Yeah, chati shir.
How about kairich? Sounds very much like kairich, right? You mix them all together, v'ochlan, and you ate them, patur. You will not get corporal punishment. If you did it by accident, you won't have to bring a carbon. But more to the point, you're going to see from this Gemara, we're talking about the corporal punishment. This was premeditated. You knew exactly the forbidden foodstuffs you were dealing with, and you did this anyway. You will be patur, you will not get any malchus, you will not get any corporal punishment.
If you eat them individually, you will?
Correct. So what happened? Zogt Reish Lakish as follows: Efsher shlo yarbe min al chavera v'yavat lanu. It's impossible that in the chewing process, that one species, one type of prohibited food, will not gain the majority in each mouthful, in each chew, in each mastication. Right? It's impossible that one of the forbidden articles will not gain a majority volume over the other, but you don't have a full zayas of that majority either, right? V'yavat lana, and it'll nullify the minority. Okay, now you want to talk about concentrated Talmudic theory? 1 halacha, three planks in Talmudic theory. Shema minah tlas. We hear from Reish Lakish's pronouncement, we can derive 3 rules, 3 basic principles. Shema minah isurin mevatlin zeh. Unlike mitzvahs, we said that mitzvahs cannot be mevatel zeh, right? Hillel in the times of the temple ate his Pesach, his matzah, and his maror together, and he fulfilled all 3 mitzvahs. What do you mean? Should be mevatel one another. Mitzvahs are not mevatel one another. Isurim are mevatel one another. Nicer can be mevatel pigel, tumah can be mevatel, tamei can be mevatel nicer, and vice versa. Isurim can be mevatel one another. First chiddush. Non-equation between the positive and the negative. Our whole Minchas Chinuch is basically predicated on equations. between the positive and the negative. Here we have an opinion of an Amira and the Gemara. Shlakish says, no, Yisurim are mevatel one another, unlike mitzvahs which cannot be mevatel one another. Number one. Ushmamina, nice and tam b'raiv, lav daraisa. Okay. When you go to the rabbi and you say, you know something, Rabbi, I was cooking a pot of beef stew, and some milk fell in. Is it kosher or is it not? So the rabbi says, well, how many quarts was the pot? It was a 5-quart pot. And how much milk fell in? A teaspoon, a tablespoon? No, 3.5 quarts, maybe a gallon of milk. So what? What's the shiloh? Of course it's treif. A gallon of milk fell in? You need bittul b'shishin. For nullification of milk, you need 60 times the volume. You should know that. What are you wasting my time for? What do you mean? But the majority was still meat. Says the Gemara over here, nice and tam b'raiv lav daraisa. It's not such a ridiculous shiloh. On daraisa, a gallon of milk, 5 quarts of meat. You can still taste the milk very much, but that's on Issa daraisa. It's only Issa darabanan. The meat comes midaraisa and is mavatal the taste of the milk. But meat and milk isn't good because meat and milk individually, each one is heter. It could have a whole different gather. Okay? I had a pork stew next to my beef stew. Okay? I run a restaurant. I have one kitchen. I have my kosher restaurant. I have a non-kosher restaurant. These are tough economic times. You got to think out of the box. Okay? And Rabbi, what can I do? Some of the pork stew spilled into the beef stew. How much? A tablespoon? No, a gallon. Right? Midaraisa, that would be okay. You don't say because nice and tam, anything more than a 60th is still a nice and tam. The tam, the taste of the forbidden food can still be felt. Right? Doesn't matter. That's down Issa Daraisa. Midaraisa on a Torah level, the majority nullifies the minority. Finish. Why? How do you see that from Rish Lakish's din? Because what are we worried about? What's happening inside the guy's mouth during the chewing process? Right? He's got a full zayas of stuff in his mouth. Right? 3/4 of it is tameh. Yeah? And 1/4 of it is pigul. So he doesn't have a full zayas of either one. Right? Well, look, I admit that he doesn't have a full zayas of the majority. That I understand. Right? But the ratio of minority to majority, the taste of the minority permeates. Yeah? If it will be a kazayas of carrots and a 1/4 zayas of pigul. If you hold nice and tam as deraisa, he's eating a full zayas. Right? Nice and tam turns the carrots into treif stuff too, into pigul stuff too. Right? Wrong. Nice and tam. Right? So paradoxically, the thing that would be asati will be the minority thing, not the majority thing. If nice and tam is a din deraisa, nice and tam is not a din deraisa. The prohibition of that you can't eat certain foodstuffs because their taste permeated the whole stew, the whole food stuff. That's not a din deraisa. It would be a din deraisa. The guy would not be patur. You get malchus for the minority thing, or for the majority thing. Either take your pick. Either one is interpenetrating the other. Certainly enough. If I've got 3/4 of a zayas of pigul in my mouth and 1/4 of a zayas of tameh, right? So you can look at this zayas either way. It's either totally pigul or it's totally tameh, right? Certainly the 3/4 zayas of whatever there is permeates the 1/4 zayas and gives it its taste, right? But even the minority could give the majority its taste also. Take your pick. Either one. The guy ate a full zayas of isid. If nice and tam is deraisa. Shma mina, nice and tam, lav deraisa. You got limud number 2? Mm-hmm. You're going to love limud number 3. Ushma mina hasra safik loishma hasra. Gentlemen, are we briskas here? How many people in this room push off their whole zayas of matzah into their cheek and then swallow it in one instant? Do you do that? Do you do that? Okay. I'm getting into practice now so I can impress my daughter Leah, who's only 11 years old. When she brings home a brisker chassan, I'll be able to impress the guy that I'm on board with his chumras. Okay? But Okay, I shouldn't make fun. It's a Minchas role. It's a very legitimate chumrah. But Lamaisa, it's brought in Paiskim much earlier than Brisky and the like doing it, right? But Lamaisa, we know there's a concept called Achilu B'chdei Achilas Pras. The definition of Achilu, I don't need to swallow the whole kazayas in one fell swoop. As long as I eat it within Achilas Pras, I don't know what the shir of Achilas Pras is. 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 12 minutes. I forget off the top of my head what the shir of Achilas Pras is. Yeah? But I can chop up my zayas into very little itty bitty pieces, and as long as I get it down in the requisite time, I've eaten my zayas. So what do I care to these surim of atlas? Yeah? What do I care to the 3/4 of pigel? Nullified the quarter of tameh. I'll get the rest of my quarter of pigel a minute later. The answer is that at any given moment in the chewing, I'm going to end up eating 3 kazaysim. Yeah? But at any given moment, the guy who observes you doing the eating these forbidden foods can't tell you which one you're doing. I don't know if at this moment you're swallowing a kazayas of pigel, or of nicer, or of tameh. Right? So any hasra, any warning that I give you, will be a suffix, will be a questionable thing. Hasra suffix, loishma hasra. You can never give an equivocal hasra. Okay, you'll look confused. So there was a prerequisite piece of data that I didn't share with you. The rule is in halachic jurisprudence, when we had our courts up and running, and we could give corporal punishment and capital punishment, okay, very rarely were either corporal punishment or capital punishment given. And the reason for that is because there's a very exacting demand called hasra, a warning. What that means is 2 kosher witnesses have got to watch the guy doing the sin, transgressing, and they have to warn him. It's a question if one of them or both of them have to warn him, but somebody has to warn him while 2 witnesses are watching the scene going on. Don't do what you're about to do. The Torah said, yeah, ubasa b'asara treifa loisachel. The guy's about to eat something treifa. He's about to eat an animal that had a hole in its lung. Yes. You have to quote the pasuk, right? You have to tell him what prohibition, which part of the law code you're about to transgress. Okay. And he's got to turn around and say, I hear you, and I'm doing it anyway. And all this has to transpire within 3 or 4 seconds. Within 3 or 4 seconds of the warning must come the transgression. Okay, so we're basically talking theoretics here. Right. Which is why the famous Gemara Makkah says, among other reasons, that a bezdin that gave capital punishment more than once in 70 years was a hanging court, was a kangaroo court. Right? Because obviously they were playing a little fast and loose with these specs. Because obviously with specs like this, actual punishment was few and far between. Nevertheless, we want to know what the law is for the hypothetical case when it does happen. What?
Even for Makos?
Well, Makos may not have had some of the things that it says in the Gemara Makos. Although, yeah, for sexual indiscretion, one of the things the Gemara says of it is that the Eidim have to see kamachal b'shfeiferis. If you're witnessing, if you're testifying about a sex crime, you've got to see penetration like a mascara applicator going into the applicator. That's how close up, and personally, you have to see the anatomy of the 2 transgressors.
Well, never happened either.
What?
Makos.
So at least makas for sex crimes probably didn't happen. Makas for eating crimes may have happened. But the Gemara didn't even get to that part about how difficult it is to give asra. Okay? But there is such a thing as asra, and sometimes it was given legally, and sometimes people transgress. But an equivocal asra doesn't count. Even if you quote the guy chapter and verse. And even if he says, I hear you and I'm doing it anyway. And even if all this transpires within 3 or 4 seconds, right? If you tell the guy, hey, stop that. Don't eat that. That might be real beef on your cheeseburger, or that might be tofu. Sveika deraisa l'chumra. You have to desist from it if it's an issa deraisa, if it's a Torah level prohibition and you're not sure. You must desist. And if you don't, it's possible, if the chemist comes down there and checks out and that really is beef, it's possible you're going to get malchus. So even if the chemist comes down or the butcher comes down and tells you, yeah, that was real beef, it's too late. An equivocating hasra warning is no warning at all. Hasra safek lav shmei hasra, that's what the Gemara says over here. Ushma mina hasra safek lo shma hasra. We hear from this that an equivocating hasra doesn't count, because although it's true that you've got a full zayas of Isser at any given moment while the guy's eating his 3 olives worth, The Adam never know what to give Asra for. Say, stop what you're doing. Why should I? It's pickle. It might not be. It might only be nicer. Okay, stop it. It might be nicer. Yeah, but it might be tamei. Okay, that's called an equivocating Asra.
It has to be the precise Isser.
Right.
And if they're not sure, then the Asra is not.
Right. I mean, I gave a different example. I gave an example. You know the precise Isser, but you don't know if this is Isser or Heter. Right? The Gemara is going a step further and calling even this is Asra Suffolk. Where you know it's definitely Asra what you're doing, but we don't know the precise Isser that you're doing right now. We know you're doing something wrong, but we can't give it a name. Okay? That's also Asra Suffolk, and that doesn't count either. Mesiv Rava, and this is going to be, unfortunately, gentlemen, we're being grabbed by the clock. You have families, I have a family. As fun and as enlightening as this is, we're going to have to stop soon. We're not going to get back Nabuch to our Minchas Chinuch tonight, but let's just finish with a couple lines of Gemara here. Mesiv Rava, Asa Isa min chitnu min orez. If a person made matzah out of not a single malt scotch, not a single malt matzah, a good blend, some wheat and some rice. Okay? Don't everyone go ballistic. If you're not Sephardic, you don't eat rice on Pesach anyway. But in the times of the Gemara, it was before the Ashkenazi Sephardi split on this thing. Kitnius were allowed in the times of the Gemara. Everyone could eat rice on Pesach. But rice is not one of the 5 minei dagan, the 5 Torah prescribed types of grain with which you can fulfill the mitzvah of matzah. Nor can it become chametz. Rice. Okay? So let's say a guy made a blend. Yeah? He's got blended flour, it's part wheat flour, it's part rice flour. Also, he made your dough out of wheat and out of rice. If it has the taste of dagan, of wheat, then you have to take challah. I'm sorry, did I say this is on Pesach? This is Stamazeh. In the middle of the year, there's a mitzvah of challah. When you make a dough out of one of the chameshus minei dagan, the 5 kinds of grain that can become either chametz or matzah, and you make a requisite amount, you have to call what's being mafresh challah. You have to take off a certain amount, and in temple times they gave it to the kohen. In contemporary practice, we burned that part that we separate off. V'afagav deruba is, even though it's a mixture that's 51% rice flour and only 49% wheat flour, but it's nice and tam. So you see, nice and tam is a din deraisa. Taking off challah is a mitzvah deraisa. If you're going to say that nice and tam is only a din derabanan, what are you being mafresh challah for? You make a bracha levatala. So you see, nice and tam is a din deraisa. So on the first shmamina, there were 3 shmaminas, there were 3 principles we learned out of Reish Lakish's din. The first one was that nice and tam is lav deraisa. I don't look at the whole zayas as pigel, even though the majority is pigel and it's giving taste into the tamei or into the nicer. I say no, that's not the rice dikadin, nice and tam. It's got to be pure, unadulterated. The full zayas of one kind of stuff. Well, if that were true, why would you have to take off challah from something like this?
So you're saying this kasha makes it a stira from what he said before. It's not.
Right.
It's the opposite of what he's saying.
And on that note, I wish you all a bitter, hard, laborious Tisha B'Av and a zis and kosher on Pesach.